Alright, so welcome back to the DJI O4 Mobula6 2024 edition build series. And if you're not sure what this is all about, I've got an introduction video that I'll put down in the description below where I explain what I'm planning to do with the DJI O4 Air Unit Lite and the Mobula6 2024 edition frame here. So in that video, I explain the components that I go through and what I'm planning to do to try and get this thing to work. And if it doesn't work, my plans to figure out another way to go about it. So the first thing I'm going to do in this is take the motor plugs off to lighten up the load on this flight controller and build. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these here. Alright, so to remove the motor plugs, it's a bit of a hard task to do, but basically what I'm going to try and do, and the way I like to do it, is I use these helping hands here to clamp onto the plug itself, and I start to solder these 3 points here. So I'm going to have to flood these 3 points so that only these 3 points will get a whole bunch of solder in there to get it all loose, and then I pull away the flight controller and hopefully the plug will come off. So I'm going to give that a try now and you'll see it in a second. Right, so I'm just going to add extra solder to these points here, being extra careful not to touch anything else on the board. Right, so there you go. That's how I usually do it, and it's come off nice and clean. So all 3 points, it's now come off quite nicely because the flux has actually made the points there kind of clean themselves up automatically. But what I'll go back to it and touch them up to make sure that there's no bridging on that as well. Alright, so that one came off nicely, but it did have this ball here, so I'm going to try and clean that up just by wiping away, cleaning the tip, and repeat. Alright, so there you go. I've taken off the motor plugs there, all 4 of them, and I'm just going to go over it off camera just to clean these up. So just going to wipe away, use a bit of flux to help with cleaning them up and making sure that none of them are bridging and I haven't bridged onto any of the other components. Alright, so I've just checked all the points there and they seem to be pretty isolated, nothing's bridging at the moment. Hopefully it stays that way. And the next step I can get onto is putting the motors on. So it's hard to get the motors soldered onto the flight controller when it's already in the frame, and it's pretty easy to get the motors looped into the frame. I'll just show you here. It's easy to push the motors into these little holes here to get them onto the right side once we've got the motors already onto the flight controller. So I'll do that step first and then I'll mount it onto the frame. Okay, so with the motor wires, I'm just going to basically snip them off right as close as possible to the plug. I'm going to use as much of the wire as possible because these seem to be quite short. So I'll do that here. And if I need to shorten them later, which I don't think so, if I need to shorten them, I can't. It's hard to extend these, and also I don't want to add the weight. So I can wire them on now, each one of these. It doesn't matter which order of the wires going onto which pads of the motor pads on the flight controller. We can change the motor direction in Betaflight later. Alright, so I've stripped about 1 millimeter off the ends of these wires here, and I'm just going to tin them lightly and then wire them onto the flight controller. Before I wire on the motor, I'm going to add a bit of solder to each of these points here. Alright, so I've got one motor on now and I'll repeat the same for the other 3. Alright, so the motors are on now and I've checked the solder points there. They seem to be good. Nothing's bridging, I hope. I've checked on this side and also, just a warning, to check on the back as well, making sure that nothing's bridging. I didn't really clean that up too much, but nothing is really touching, so I'm just going to leave it just so I don't really mess it up, the work that I've already done on this side. Alright, so now that we have the motors wired up here, the next step I'm going to be doing is wiring up the harness for the DJI O4 Air Unit so we can plug it in later and get it all working together. So on this harness, I'm going to prepare it first. I'm going to remove these 2 wires here because this yellow one and this brown one is for the S-Bus and 5 volt for S-Bus, I think, or the ground. So I'm just going to remove them, and I'm going to use just the red, black, I think white and grey. So following just this diagram here, you can see it here or the other way around. I think it's this way here. Yeah, so it is the S bus and ground, and the other four we'll be using for the flight controller. The way that I do it is get a blade here, and I lift up the tab, hold the wire first. I lift up the tab on one side very carefully in here, and it lets me slide that out there, so I can pull that out there, and also on this side as well. Alright, so that side's done. On this side here, I don't know how long I'm going to need this wire, so just to be sure, I'm going to cut it right as long as possible on this end of the connector. And now I've got this harness so I can solder it onto the flight controller here. So I'll just be running by the wiring diagram on the Happymodel website, so I'll just look it up now. Hey, it's Nam from the future here. There's something that I did as a mistake here and wire it to UART2. On the Happymodel website, it does say that the default for the Express LRS is connected to the UART2, so don't use the RX2 and TX2, use the RX1 and TX1. I wanted to keep this part where I made the mistake here in the video just so that no one else makes that mistake as well, because I missed it even though I had gone through all of the documentation as much as I could, but I guess I missed that part, so I put it on RX1 and TX1. Okay, so on the flight controller here, just looking at it from this end here, you can see these are the points here that I'll be using. So the one right up here is a 5 volt, so that's a power that's going to go to the air unit. The ground over here, and also the TX and RX2 are both here. So this is the TX2 and that's the RX2. So I'll be soldering it to these pads here. And I'll get onto that now. Alright, so just making sure, double checking the wiring diagram so that we get the wiring correctly. Red one obviously of the wire is going to go to this 5 volt here. So I'll just point to it there. So it's going to go to this 5 volt here. So red's going to go here and the black one out here. I'll do the red one first and I'll make it come upwards because that's where the air unit's going to be. Okay, and the next one is RX2. So the RX2 on the DJI cable is the grey one, so it's this one here. And the next one is the white one. RX is going to go to the TX, which is the next one here. And the last one, of course, the black one, which is ground, goes on to this one here. So the DJI harness is on now, and hopefully we can get that plugged in. Not sure how this is going to work going around the whole thing, but let's give it a go. Right, lastly is the battery lead. So I'm just going to wire up the battery lead, and I'm not going to shorten it yet. I'm just going to wire it up as it is, and then I'll shorten it later from the battery lead end side. So I'm just going to tin these up, so tin the ground and the battery plus here, and it's going to come downwards, so I'm going to make sure I'm going to get enough solder on them and then solder this on. Alright, so I think that's all the wiring that we need to do. The motors, the battery lead, and also the DJI O4 Air Unit Lite cable. And now we go on to the point of mounting it onto the frame here. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the gummies onto the flight controller and then mount it in here after looping the motors through the gaps there. So I'll do that now. Alright, so the orientation of the frame will be facing like this because the battery will be going back to front like that. And the battery lead and the USB port will be going down the back here. So I'm going to have to try and push this through somehow and loop all of these through just to get it right, and hopefully we can get it all fitting correctly. Okay, so the flight controller is in now and the rubber gummies are pushed down on the posts. So I'm going to screw in the motors now so that they don't wobble around everywhere, and we'll get onto that now with the peak screws. So I have these peak screws. They're from Beta FPV. They're really tiny screws, of course, that mount these motors. They're made of a plastic called PEEK, and they're supposedly very durable. So I bought this on AliExpress. I'll link down in the description so that you can get them too. But they're not that cheap. They're quite expensive. I think they're like 3 or 4 times the price. And I think the whole pack was about, after shipping, $15 Australian. So they're quite pricey for what they really are. But I want to get this build as light as possible, and that's what it's going to cost me. Alright, so now we got the canopy ready and the air unit here, and also the frame all done with the flight controller, wiring harness and all that. The next step is I'm going to show you these little spaces that I've designed. I've made a 3D model of this, and it's tiny so it's a bit hard to show you, but there you go. It's a little spacer that turns the M3 holes into the M or 1.2 millimeter hole for these screws. So these screws here that came with the flight controller, they fit more snugly. You don't have to have that, I don't think. You could probably get away with it, but anyhow, I've got it here and that's what I want to use. So there you go. I'm just gonna plug them in, put them onto the air unit, and they'll be sitting in like this. Alright, so I've got them in now, the spacers, and the air unit, I'm gonna try and put it in like this. I'm not sure what the best orientation of layout would be at the moment, but I'm gonna give it a go like this, and hopefully this can go around and plug in. So I think it's just the right amount of length to get it there. I'll plug it in now because then it'll be a bit hard to do a bit later. So let's see which way this has to go. I think I have to twist it around. Hope there's enough wire there, and I think there is just. And I hope the camera has enough room as well once I've done this. So I have the Express LRS wire antenna coming out that way, and I think I'm going to have to do it like this. I'm going to have to thank a person called IAmDylan on Thingiverse who posted this up. So he designed this one here, and I downloaded it. I was going to design one myself, but I found one online, so I just wanted to get this video out as soon as possible. So since there's already one out there, I printed this one and I'm going to use it here. So thank you, IAmDylan, and I'll post a link down in the description down below for you to download as well. Right, before I get this onto the frame, I'm going to have to push these screws into this TPU where they're supposed to. So these 3 points here and one at the back. I'm going to get them in first just to prepare, and it makes it easier to then mount it onto the actual frame. So I'll get onto that now. Alright, so to get the camera onto this canopy camera mount, I'm going to have to put the wire at the top. So on the instructions here, it says this way up when installing. So I'm not sure if you can actually turn the image upside down or flip it 180 degrees in the camera settings or the goggle settings, but just to follow the instructions, I'll do this now, and if there is options to flip them, then I'd like to turn it around. I don't like the wire coming at the top, but anyhow, let's follow the instructions. Okay, so the camera is in now, and the wire is going to be up here, but hopefully I can bend it down like this and get it in there nice and snug. So I'll put the front screw in first, so it holds the camera down easily. Alright, so there we have it. The canopy is on now. My camera battery ran out while I was actually recording that last bit, but all I did was basically screw these in the way that they are there, so you can see it there. So I think that's pretty much it. Got everything on there and it's ready to actually fire up. And I've done a couple of tests on this already in terms of using a multimeter, checking the terminals that they're not shorted anywhere in here after doing all the soldering, and a couple of checks around as well, just eyeballing it, seeing that everything's alright. So what we have to do now is plug in a battery and see if this thing actually fires up. So I've got a couple of batteries here I want to test out on this quad. I have the Tattu 300 milliamp hours, these ones here. I also have the dog comm as well. I haven't used these before, but I did just pick them up, so I'll give this a try. And I do have this as well, which is quite interesting, the GNB 380. I'm not sure how they can have 380 in there for the same size. I think it's due to the fact that this is a 60C rating and also this is a 75, so maybe that's why it gets a bit more milliamp hour and might last longer, but I won't be able to punch out as much as these guys do. So I'll try them out, see how they go, and hopefully that this thing fires up and also the air unit actually is able to run and transmit to the goggles. So let's give it a go. Alright, so I'm just going to plug it in now and see how we go. Hopefully this doesn't fry, and I'm going to give it a go right now. 1, 2, 3. Okay, maybe not. It's a bit hard to plug in. Alright, so it fired up and flight controller is blinking, and also the LED on the O4 Air unit is also on as well. So it seems to be firing up okay. I haven't obviously tested it yet. I'll have to actually activate the air unit and also bind it to the goggles, so I'll give that a go now. Alright, so one thing I did forget to do was cut down the antenna down to the right size for 5.8 GHz, and what I've done is cut away the heat shrink from the DJI one that came with the air unit. So here you go, if you want to know what's inside this little black thing here, the heat shrink, this is the antenna. This is a bit of shielding, and this is the exposed active wire for the antenna. I've measured that up and it comes up to be about 12.6 there, so I'll just show you there, 12.6, and I'm going to cut this one to be exactly the same length. So I'll give that a go now, and hopefully we're ready to start binding this up and flying. Alright, so I've cut it now just to double check that measurement, 12.6, and it's bang on. Alright, I'll get that out of the way. So now I'm going to try and bind it to the goggles. Okay, so I'm ready to bind. So I've got a fan here just to blow over the air unit, so to prevent the overheating. I'm just going to plug it in now and fire it up. And I'll get the air unit into binding mode first, so I'll press the button over here. So it's flashing now, hopefully that means it's in bind mode, and I'll press the bind button on here. Alright, there you go, it's bound, and just going to check in the goggles to see if this actually did work. The air unit is not activated and functionality is limited, so make sure the air unit has power, then connect to DJI Assistant 2. So I haven't done that yet. I'll go away and do that now, but I think I can get past this menu. I'm not sure. No, I can't get anywhere past the menu, so I'm just going to activate it now on my computer. Alright, so I'm back after activation and I'm just going to plug back in. Hopefully it does bind and I'm able to see picture. I'll keep the fan there. I'll just check the goggles. And there we have it, it works, everything is showing up, it looks nice, nice digital image there. So here's a photo of the image inside the goggles at the moment, and there you go, it's working at the moment. Of course the true test is if I start flying this thing and seeing if it actually browns out after a while, if the battery drops to a low voltage. So I'm going to set that all up, I'll configure Betaflight and also the OSD and everything and bind it to my controller, and we'll go for a test flight. Okay, so here's my first flight. I'm just about to take off, and I've set the video recording and also the stream as 1080p at 100 frames per second because Madstech had said that that was what drawed the lowest current. So here we go, I'm about to take off and you'll see what happens. Alright, so you can see what happened there. It died in the air. So the air unit cut out, it browned out, and it fell out of the sky. The flight controller was still going, but as you can tell, the air unit then died out, and it booted up again, and then I was able to fly again for another second, and same thing happened. I should have listened to Albert Kim. He did say,
"Do not try this. I think it's a bad idea."
So yeah, should have listened to him, but I tried it out anyway, and this is what happened. However, this was running it with the onboard recording of the flight, and I was able to get it to actually work without having the recording on. So here's a test flight that I was able to get it to go to fly around the yard and everything like that with the onboard recording turned off. I've then tuned the output transmission power down to 25 milliwatts, and within a small area, my backyard here, it's not that large, but I was able to fly in an open space and still be able to get 50 megabits per second. And I was able to fly around for about 2 minutes. I do get it back at about 3.6, 3.7, just to be sure that I don't just fall out somewhere far so I don't have to go and pick it up. There is still a bit of tuning that I need to do on this quad because there is a bit of jitters that are happening, so I'll try and tune that out. But also, right, as you can see, there's a bit of wind on this day as well, and as you can see, it has been very windy across my area here. And the shed that you can see laying down there on the floor, I just haven't picked it up because the strong winds would push it over again anyway. Fortunately, nothing was inside it. So for me, the 2 minutes runtime that I can fly around and have fun like this and do a DVR recording from my goggles, it does work like that, and be able to have some fun as well. So this is something that is useful for me at this stage, and I'm going to continue to use it like this for now until I get the Beta FPV flight controller. So once I get that, I'm going to do another video, install the Beta FPV Matrix 3-in-1, and hopefully the current that it can supply out of that can keep it running and also be able to have the onboard recording as well. So with a Happymodel SuperX flight controller, it does work, but there are limitations. You can't have onboard recording, you can only get this DVR, and you only get about 2 minutes of flight time, but I think that's due to the weight. So even if I do get the Beta FPV 3-in-1 Matrix flight controller, I'm still only going to get the 2 minutes, but at least I'll get the onboard recording. Alright, so there you go, the O4 Air Unit on a Mobula6 2024 edition frame, and it does kind of work. As you saw, it has some potential to it, and I think that we will be able to get an O4 Air Unit to work on a 65mm frame, and I think Beta FPV has already come out with one. But here I just wanted to experiment and get something like this working, and I hope you enjoyed it. A couple of things to note, changes that I've done here, you might be able to see. I've got a bit of heat shrink here because I think that part of the wobbling of the canopy here, it might be introducing some noise into or vibrations into the gyro. I've put on here these rubber bands that hold down the motor wires, and they're basically rubber bands like this here, elastic bands that I got from eBay, and they're hair ties that my girls use, and basically they're really thin, really small, and I cut it to make a string of elastic, and I use that to tie them down, and it's really lightweight, and they're durable as well. They last quite a while when I've put it on like that. I mounted the mod here as well to turn the battery plug here, the A30 plug, 180 degrees, so it's easier to plug in the battery. It might shave a bit of weight as well. One last thing is that when you plug this into the computer, the flight controller, if you go into beta flight, just be mindful that it does have enough power to fire up the air unit, and it does actually transmit. So just keep that in mind. You might want to have a fan on it so that it keeps it cool, or else it starts to heat up quite a lot. It actually gets quite hot to the touch. But what sometimes I do is I have the plug here for the air unit, and I basically just use a couple of small screwdrivers and pop that out, and then I plug into Betaflight just to make sure that the air unit is not overheating if I know I'm going to be tuning or changing a lot of settings within Betaflight. Okay, so that's it for this video. I just wanted to experiment, like I said, and I had fun doing it. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, put them down below and I'll get to them, hopefully. I'm really excited to see, and I've got a lot of feedback from people already, so keep them coming, and I'd like to have a chat about, you know, any suggestions that we could start working together to start building something that works. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it or learned something from it. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.